Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. So since last night, since the murders of 59 people and 527 people sent to the hospitals, local hospitals in Vegas, with injuries and wounds, a lot of people have been wondering what were the weapons that were used by the killer, Stephen Paddock, who is now dead, apparently took his own life as the police were getting ready to use explosives to take down the door of his room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Emily Taylor joins me now, a gun law expert at U.S. Law Shield. Emily, it's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, obviously, when people heard the audio from last night, there were a lot of people in the audience at that Jason Aldean concert who were listening to the sound. And the sound was very, very distinctive. And in fact, for people to hear it, I thought I'd share it. And that staccato sound, people said, well, that's automatic weapons fire. And of course, automatic weapons are, for the most part, illegal in the United States, except that you can own one if it's pre-86 and if it has the right federal tax stamps and you've gone through the background checks and all that. You think there may be a simpler explanation for what Stephen Paddock, the killer, used last night?
I don't, actually. I tend to agree, although law enforcement has not come out and confirmed this, I tend to agree that that is the unmistakable sound of fully automatic fire. And it is a bizarre, there are lots of things about this incident that are just very strange and don't fit with our general understanding of mass shootings. And that is one of them. It's completely bizarre that a fully automatic weapon would be used in one of these incidents because of the hurdles and that people have to jump through in order to get one.
Well, but is it just as possible that perhaps the sound and the inconsistent rate of gunfire might be the result of somebody using the myriad of cheap and legal modification devices that are used to turn a semi-automatic rifle into a fully automatic rifle? I mean, I go to SHOT Show every year, which is the shooting, hunting, outdoor trade show, and we do a broadcast. And I've had people approach me and say, "Hey, look at this! It'll take your semi-auto and make it fire like a full auto." And apparently there are no legal prohibitions on owning those little devices as long as you don't modify the gun itself.
So I think that you're referencing a bump stock.
Bump stock or the Gatling. I think there's a Gatling device that's used to sort of quickly pull the trigger over and over again, which doesn't convert it to full auto, but it can mimic the behavior of it.
Sure, it absolutely can. There are, these devices are totally lawful. They are, still we're looking at one pull of the trigger or one round is expelled from the firearm. However, the bump stock in particular is an interesting item because the action of the firearm itself actually does make it, although technically you are still pulling the trigger, it does make it fire as though it were a fully automatic weapon. It's certainly possible that he could have been employing one of these devices, although there are reports coming out that he did have some measure of wealth, which would explain how he could have a fully automatic weapon.
He could, and the only thing that I guess augurs against that, Emily, is I think that Las Vegas LEO, law enforcement organizations, have been fairly open about telling us what they know. Now, they may not be giving up everything, but in this case, they don't have a legal case or a suspect because the suspect is dead. And so they've been relatively good. Even this afternoon when they served a search warrant at his home, they indicated that while they found 16 firearms in his hotel room, they found an additional 18 in his home. And those are details that often we don't hear if there's still a live suspect involved. They hold them back for various reasons. But if they had run his background and found that he legally bought a fully automatic weapon, which he could have done, they're not cheap if you can find them. And I don't have one of them. And you have to live in the right state because there's some states that say you can't own one even if the federal government says it's legal. So he could have done that. But you're suggesting perhaps he bought a black market full auto machine gun without the federal tax stamp or sign off?
Oh, no. I have nothing to make me think that he had bought this on the black market, but just, quite simply, most people in this country could not afford a fully automatic weapon through either legal or illegal means. And the reason for that is exactly what you mentioned before, which is that it is not lawful to own, possess, sell, any of it, a fully automatic firearm that was not registered as of May 19th, 1986.
Yep.
So we have this limited supply of fully automatic firearms. And, of course, we all know what limited supply does to cost. It's incredibly expensive. Now, does that mean that he could not have obtained something on the black market? I'm sure that it's certainly possible, particularly when you think about the fact that what makes that firearm fully automatic is nothing more than a fully automatic sear, which you could.
By the way, Emily, for my audience, explain what that sear is, that little piece of metal.
Absolutely. A sear, it's a small piece of metal. It's in the trigger mechanism, and it is shaped differently between fully automatic and semi-automatic weapons. And the fully automatic sear is shaped in such a way that you can discharge multiple rounds through a single trigger pull. Hypothetically, someone could go buy a sear alone, and they could, slip that in their pocket and get on an airplane, right? It is easy to run around with a sear. Now, that being said, it is absolutely a federal and in most states a state-level felony to possess a fully automatic sear because that is the machine gun itself, right? Other than the sear, the guts of a semi-automatic firearm are exactly the same as the guts of a fully automatic. So that sear is, in fact, the machine gun. And so you must, if you're going to be in possession of that sear, have complied with all of the regulatory hoops that you have to jump through.
And by the way, Emily, probably 25 years ago, I talked to a man, and I thought he got railroaded, but he was a man who was a gunsmith. He actually worked on law enforcement weapons in the state of Washington and was allowed to repair or work on the various machine guns that law enforcement owned legally. And one day, for whatever reason, the feds came down and raided his shop, and they believed that perhaps and they found one sear. And it was just a bare little piece of metal, but they said this is the machine gun. And I interviewed him in federal prison because he was in his 70s and he was sitting there on a 6 or 7 year sentence. So if anybody thinks, could a little piece of metal actually send you to federal prison? I've talked to a man who was sitting in federal prison for exactly that. So it's not anything to possess lightly because just having it in your pocket makes you a federal felon.
Exactly. The NFA items, which are fully automatic weapons, suppressors, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, etc. There are several more on this list. They are no joke. You must, if you are going to possess one of these items, you probably should have created a trust because that's the easiest and most efficient way to own or possess. You need to have petitioned the ATF, filled out your form. You need to have sent your fingerprints to the ATF, have notified your chief law enforcement officer in your county, and you're probably on a machine gun, you're waiting probably more than a year for the privilege of paying the government over $200 and then the firearms dealer probably more than $15,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap at all. Emily, I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for the work you do at U.S. Law Shield.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Glad to have you on. Emily Taylor.